Second observation, you never know when a situation will present itself when you're going to have to decide who you are and what you stand for. The defining moments in our lives often don't come with advance warning. They can arise in scenarios we would have never expected, and they don't come sometimes with the luxury of a whole lot of time to go inside yourself for some serious introspection. So how do you prepare for all of that? You're type A people, I know that. You want to be prepared. I had such an experience recently with the travel ban. As you heard, it's a tradition at the Department of Justice for the Deputy Attorney General to stay on during the transition between administrations. And that's for good reason. It's important to have continuity. And so I agreed to stay on as Acting Attorney General until President Trump's Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, could be confirmed. It was supposed to be an uneventful time. We had agreed with the incoming team that while I was the Acting Attorney General, things would stay just as they were. No positions of the Department of Justice would change. Everything would stay status quo. Well, I was in the car on the way to the airport late in the afternoon of Friday, January 27th, when I learned from media reports that the President had signed an executive order restricting travel from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Even though this was the very first we had heard of this, we were going to have DOJ lawyers in courts all over the country defending it within a matter of hours. And on Monday, I learned that we had to take a position at the department on the constitutionality of the order. This is not what I was expecting. My former chief of staff had jokingly told me that during the short time that I was acting AG, I'd have time for, and these are her words, a lot of long, boozy lunches. As we expected that everything was going to be quiet during this time, but I can tell you there wasn't time for lunches at all, boozy or otherwise. Now, don't worry, I'm not about to launch into an exhausting discussion of constitutional law or immigration law. And I appreciate that people of goodwill can have very different views, both on the legality of the order and what I should have done in this scenario. But I do think that it's illustrative of an unexpected moment when the law and conscience intersected, and the decision had to be made in a very short period of time. After reviewing the legal challenges and reading cases and conferring with the DOJ lawyers, I came to the conclusion that defending the constitutionality of the travel ban would require the Department of Justice to argue that the executive order had nothing to do with religion, that it was not intended to disfavor Muslims. And this was despite the numerous prior statements that had been made by the President and his surrogates regarding his intent to effectuate a Muslim ban. I believed that this would require us to advance a pretext, a defense not grounded in truth. And so I directed the Department of Justice not to defend the ban. I appreciate that some believe that I should have just resigned instead of ordering the department not to defend the travel ban. And that's a fair question. I grappled with that all over the weekend and during the day on Monday. But I believed then, and I believe now, that resigning would have protected my personal integrity, but it would not have protected the integrity of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is not DOJ isn't just another law firm, and this wasn't just any legal issue. It was about the core founding principle of religious freedom. And I couldn't in good conscience send DOJ lawyers into court to advance an argument that the travel ban was unrelated to religion, when the evidence of intent reflected that that was not the case. Now, there wasn't much time to examine the weighty constitutional law concepts that were implicated here, nor was there a lot of time to craft the directive that we ultimately issued to the department. But I didn't make this decision just within the 72 hours from the time I learned of the ban until I issued the decision. That decision was the result of what others had taught me over my entire 27 years with the Department of Justice. I drew on the lessons of mentors who, while I was in AUSA, who had instilled in me a reverence for the privilege of representing the people of the United States and upholding the law and the Constitution. From the judges who rightly expected DOJ lawyers to be held to a higher standard than lawyers representing private litigants, because after all, we were the Department of Justice. And also from my interactions with people whom I served, the people who had made clear time and time again that they were looking to the Department of Justice to stay true to our founding principles and to protect people's rights. That compass that's inside all of us, that guides us in times of challenge, is being built every single day with every experience that we have. And I was fortunate to have learned from some inspiring people in my life who not only served as role models for me, but challenged my assumptions and my way of thinking and helped to build my core. Over the course of your life and your career, you too will face weighty decisions where the law and conscience intertwine. And while it may not play out in such a public way, the conflict that you'll feel will be no less real, and the consequences of your decision also significant. The time for introspection is all along the way, to develop a sense of who you are and what you stand for, because you never know when you're going to be called to answer that question. The third observation: the safest course is not always the best course. Be bold. Over the course of my legal career, I have encountered people who seem to always take the safest route, and this can manifest itself in a variety of ways. It's prosecutors who don't want to lose, so they won't bring the difficult, hard-to-prove case, even though the individual is guilty and shouldn't get away with it. Private practice lawyers, whose advice is generally that which is least likely to come back and blow up on them rather than what's necessarily best for the client. They put every possible argument in a brief, they put every piece of evidence in a trial because they don't want to take the risk that they've left out something important, even though their briefs and their trial presentations are less effective because of that. This is the person who reads which way the room is going before he or she speaks up, who never tells people in authority something that they don't want to hear, who's in authority and just surrounds him or herself with people who will simply affirm their own judgment. Now, this person can rock along pretty well, probably make partner in the firm, climb up the corporate or institutional ladder. But do you want to be that person? Would you find that a very satisfying way to live, much less to practice law? From my perspective, you may be advancing your career by practicing law like this, but you're not doing your job. Doing your job means that you're not simply a reflection of someone else's values or opinions. You're the person to whom the leader turns when he or she needs to hear the truth. And I can tell you from my experience, both as Deputy Attorney General and as U.S. Attorney, I could only trust the advice of the people around me if I knew that they were willing to tell me when they thought I was wrong. I'm not advocating being reckless or irresponsible, but from my perspective, to fully embrace both life and practicing law, you got to be willing to take a risk, to be uncomfortable, to be bold. But taking a risk also means that you have to be willing to be wrong. And that can sometimes be a lonely place to be. But I hope that the fear of being wrong won't keep you from acting. Because inaction, doing nothing, or simply going along, well, that's a decision too. And it seems that it's the times in my life when I haven't acted that's when I have regretted it the most. Being willing to be wrong also requires that you're willing to own it. We're all wrong at times. It's gonna happen to all of you as well. And there's nothing worse than the person who never wants to have his or her fingerprints on anything controversial and who will try to slip out of responsibility when things hit the fan. Not only does this generally not work very well, but if your colleagues sense that you're gonna cut and run when things start going south, they're not gonna trust you. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to include you in the big moments, in the moments you went to law school for. Being bold, taking a risk, and owning it isn't easy to do, and the instinct for self-preservation may continually draw you to the safe, risk-free course. But I urge you to resist that instinct. Not only is a life of hedging your bets unsatisfying, but it means you're unlikely to make much of a difference. You can either glide across the world or impact it. It's your choice.